today's visit was really an opportunity for participants to practice the application of the 5 tools to facilitate participatory forest management. Participants were joined by community persons and staff of the JCET for this session. On arrival, there was orientation, a brief tour of the park and its facilities, or part of the park, and its facilities by the park rangers or community persons trained as tour guides. Some of the information picked up was as follows. Holywell was named for folklore. Somewhere there were healing waters that when the slaves were whipped by the masters, they bathed in those waters and healed quickly. But that place was not revealed to the masters. Holywell Park is part of the Blue Mountains and John Crow Mountains watershed area, which is the largest watershed in Jamaica. Very significant for the production of water. There is a conflict of use. There are farmers there who are engaged in afforestation programs. And in fact, they may be planting trees and themselves out of land to farm in the future. And right now, alternative lands have not been identified. So that may suggest some potential conflict in the future. The park provides significant recreational services, education services to adjoining communities, local and overseas visitors, camping facilities and cabins for rental, a special recreational area for kids, trails for hikers, nature seekers, and nursery for tree seedlings to farmers participating in the afforestation program, and ornamental plants for commercial sale. A significant activity held at the park is the Mist Festival, which is an annual cultural festival, which showcases the adjoining communities and provides an opportunity for commercial activities, food, festival, other craft, and so on. Okay, following that brief orientation to the park, we were in teams, and each team basically had to facilitate the application of the tool. And yesterday we saw a variety of methods being used to explain the concepts and to facilitate the group activities. There was always a plenary session where everyone got to learn of the basically what were the learnings, the output of the group sessions, and that was followed by the briefing session by the workshop facilitators. Tool 1 was the identification of stakeholders, and here we saw the application of role play. Group 1 explained the concept of stakeholder using a role play. There were 5 roles: a project manager, a bird watcher, an unemployed community person seeking work, the permanent secretary from the Ministry of Agriculture, Lands, and a donor representative. So this helped to explain the meaning of stakeholder: anyone who had an interest in the rights to use or the responsibility for the management of the resource, and we were looking at Holywell Park. Then there was group work. Participants easily identified the roles, and this was used as the basis for dividing participants into groups. So we had government ministries and agencies, donors, community organizations, individuals, community and individuals. Local persons acted as the resource personnel, and we expanded, each group expanded the numbers of stakeholders who fell into that category of government, community, individuals. The debriefing session basically, there was one point which I picked up, and that was the good use of role play to explain the concept. Tool 2 was the identification of key stakeholders. In this application, Group 2 used the analogy of family members and throwing a party to communicate the concept of a key stakeholder. Persons who are the most important and having the greatest interest. And they used this they communicated by posing the questions. Who are the most important persons in your life? If you were throwing a party, would you invite everyone? Or who would be the persons most important to you to have at your party? So having explained the concept, a voting process was then used to facilitate the identification of the key stakeholders. Each of the local people were given 10 dots and invited to identify the key stakeholder by voting with their dots. And the importance would be determined by the number of votes or dots that each group of stakeholders received. So as a result of that process, we had 10 key stakeholders who identified, the JCDT getting the most dots, 15, and then Forestry Department and NEPA and Community having 9 dots each. Then there was the debriefing session, and we looked at the advantages of the voting method. It allowed us to build on the information from the previous session, who were the stakeholders, and now we are trying to identify who were the most important. It was a quick and efficient method. Each person had a voice, and therefore it facilitated the participation of the introverted and the impaired. A concern that was raised was whether or not the results could be skewed, and basically, and could result in what might be a key stakeholder being omitted. And basically, it was thought that the way to address this was to validate the results by asking people, and if there was consensus that anyone had been left out, then it would be added. Tool 3 was stakeholder analysis, identifying interests, roles, and responsibilities. And the method used for that was the use of an example in a particular context. So the role play in Tool 1 was used as a reference point. The visit of the permanent secretary to the park manager, the visit of the permanent secretary and the donor to the park manager. And the concepts were explained using an example from the Forestry Department. What would be the interests, roles, and responsibility of the Forestry Department in the reforestation project that was being proposed by the ministry and that would be supported by the donor that we had seen in the Team 1's work. Then there was group work. Participants were assigned to the same groups to identify interests, roles, and responsibilities of the 10 key stakeholders. Local knowledge again as resource persons. Debriefing. It was found that the use of a specific example in a particular context was very effective in clarifying the concepts. And also it was noted that the group had adapted very well to 2 unexpected situations. One, a team member was missing, and the second activity was an interruption or a distraction of the activity when we had the result accompanied in by an unexpected delegation of high people. Okay, I suppose the NAPO would have talked about that. Stakeholder analysis, capacity, Tool 4. Okay, the method for this use was contextualizing the activity. A team member introduced the activity by relating it to the previous activities and reminded participants why the exercise of the analysis, why the analysis of stakeholder capacity was being undertaken. Then there was the use of a working definition to explain the concept of capacity, and that was facilitated by a brief interactive session with participants using the working definition. So as a result of that, 5 abilities or capacities were identified to be used to assess capacity. Philosophy, the attitude, belief or vibe, structure, the setup or organization, linkages or contacts, skills, resources. Now a very important thing there was to ensure that people understood the language. So you had the use of vibe, so that they understood philosophy, structure, mechanisms, setup, how you set up or organize. There were 3 groups government, NGO, and community, which assessed the capacity of Forestry Department, JCBT as NGO, and the community respectively. In the plenary, there were presentations by the community members of each group, and there was a summary. Following that, there was a summary of key points and presentation, which was done by another member of the group. The summary reminded the group of the objective of the exercise to relate the capacity of stakeholders to the identified interests, roles, and responsibilities in the management of the Holywell Recreation Park. Did stakeholders have the capacity? Were there areas lacking? If there was a lack of capacity, what was being done or what had to be done in order for them to fulfill the various interests, roles, responsibilities. Now I would skip what came out, the details of the presentation.